Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Lida Chang. I'm a broker at Royal LePage Commercial and a member of ULI Membership Committee. On behalf of ULI, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's session, Vaughan Rising, Vaughan Metropolitan Centre, Suburban Intensification. As a Toronto region-based organization, we acknowledge that the land we are meeting on virtually is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe and Chippewa, and Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. We will post a link to the chat to a program we did, 13,000 Years of Indigenous History in the GTA and why it matters to planning and development. We recommend you to watch it and learn the history and meaning behind the land acknowledgement. And before we begin, I would like to go through a few housekeeping items. First of all, audience will be muted throughout the session. And if you have any questions or comments, please use the Q&A function. And this webinar will be recorded. And if you have any conversations that you want to take online, please tag us with the handle at ULI Toronto or with the hashtag #AskGreatQuestions. And today's event and all other ULI programming would not be possible without the support of our annual sponsors. I would like to say a major thank you to all of them for their support. ULI Toronto relies on the support of our sponsors who allow us to put on the quality programming we do to drive our mission of creating and sustaining thriving communities. To all of them, we say thank you. And so now, to introduce our moderator for today's event. Today's programming will be emceed by Michelle Sampson, and Michelle is an economic development officer at City of Vaughan, where she's responsible for economic development, marketing, and business development citywide, but with particular emphasis on the Vaughan Metro Centre. She also hosts the Vaughan Rising podcast. I will now turn it over to Michelle, who will introduce the mayor and who will be moderating today's panel discussions. I will come back in the last 15 minutes or so to help with the Q&A. Here's Michelle Sampson.
Thanks, Lita. As she said, my name is Michelle Sampson, and if I may throw an additional title on the pile, I've been calling myself the Vaughan Metropolitan Centre's head cheerleader for a couple years now, but I'm really a newcomer to this project. Downtown Vaughan Dream has been around since 1991, when the town of Vaughan officially became a city. At that time, it was made up of 5 municipalities, all with their own historic village or town center, and to unite them, Vaughan committed to building a new commercial core at the intersection of highways 400 and 407. Then the plan really found its legs in 2006 when the province committed to extending the Spadina subway line to Vaughan and designated the area around it as an urban growth center. The rest, you might say, is history. 6.5 million square feet of residential, office, and retail space built or under construction, another 23 million square feet on the books. And one of the key people driving this living, breathing example of transit-oriented development into reality is our mayor, whose vision has set a new standard in city building. The Honorable Maurizio Bevilacqua is currently serving his 3rd term as mayor of the City of Vaughan. He was a member of parliament for 22 years, serving in several roles, including Minister of State for Finance, Minister of State for Science, Research and Development, as well as chairman of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. He is chair of the Electric Utilities Integration Committee, vice chair of York Region Rapid Transit Corporation, chair of the Hospice Vaughan Capital Campaign, as well as chair of the Mackenzie Health Foundation 250 million Ultimate Suits You campaign. He's a member of the York Region Police Services Board, the Global City Leaders Advisory Board for the World Council on City Data, and the Advisory Council for the Postgraduate Certificate in Business Administration at York University's School of Continuing Studies. Not only is he involved, he's also very educated. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from York University, a Master of Arts degree from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York City, as well as a Master of Laws degree from the University of Toronto. Over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for a very kind and generous introduction. I'm looking forward to today's discussion because I think it's very important during these times to recognize how cities can in fact overcome adversity and bring about positive results for the residents, for the businesses, and generally for economic growth and quality of life here in the city and beyond its borders. I want to thank the Urban Land Institute for the great work that you just participated in.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if your audio's coming through, but you seem to be cutting out. Perhaps we can get the mayor back in on a phone line. Sorry about that, everyone.
A decade, the Vaughan Metropolitan
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but if you could maybe turn off your video.
Hear me?
Okay. Oh, you've come back. You're freezing for extended periods of time, Mr. Mayor.
I think the suggestion to go off video is a good one, Mr. Mayor. Though I think we've lost him entirely. So we'll just, everybody, if they can hold on for a second. Sorry, Michelle, it's Richard Joy speaking, just coming in from outside here, but appreciate this. We haven't had one of these problems yet, but always a first. And with the other, one other option is we could, and there's Mayor Bevilacqua's, I can see that.
Oh, we can hear you.
Yes, we can. No, we can't. You're on mute, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, can you hear me?
There we go, much better.
Yeah, I can, you know what, if this doesn't work, I'll just call in, okay? Actually, that's probably the best thing to do. So I'll be calling right in, okay? Because I'm losing, you're coming in and out, okay? I'll do that right now. Thank you.
Do we have intermission music?
Intermission music. Well, no, we don't have intermission music, but thank you, everybody. And we've got quite a few people online, so I appreciate your patience. As I said, we haven't had a tech glitch in the many webinars that we've had since COVID. So you're watching us go through our first one, but we will maybe also be able to move to the panel if there is any challenge with the mayor and have him come in there. But I think this is going to be resolved once he dials in, which will hopefully be momentarily. Michelle, why don't you tell us a little bit about, for those of you who don't know your podcast, Vaughan Rising, just a little advertisement. It's an incredible podcast and lots more information.
Thank you so much, Richard. Actually, before I get to the podcast, I'm going to do, because we will have a plug at the end, but another plug I want to sneak into this is we have an online poll that the city would love to get all of your feedback on. We're undertaking a VMC Parks and Wayfinding master plan that's going to guide all the parks and open spaces in the VMC with the goal of creating, something really world class. So if you're interested in giving us your feedback on that, you can join the conversation at vaughan.ca/VMC Parks. So so we'd love to get your input in there. So yes, on the podcast, I feel a little bit on the spot, but there we go. Yeah. So for the past couple of years, I've been hosting and running something called the Vaughan Rising podcast. Season 1 and season 2 are both very different. Season 2, we really focused on is sort of commercial real estate, city building, all of these things that are really building and driving Vaughan's economy right now. And because the VMC is such a huge part of that story, we have these 4 episodes that are very much about the VMC and that have gotten a lot of traction and that you might find rather interesting if you're signed up for this webinar. As a bonus, we also have episode 1.5, I want to say, which is about Niagara University's site selection journey and how they ended up in the VMC. So if you're interested in that, you can go there. But yeah, 7, 8, and 10 are each with our 3 largest landowners in the VMC. And they each have really interesting and different stories about how they've leveraged this land that they have and what they have done with it. What their journey was getting to today, but all 3 of them also talk about what they plan to do in the future. And when it comes to particularly, say, smart centers and Quadrille, they have a lot of land left to build on and a lot of really big plans for those parcels. So that is my plug for the podcast. Season 2, in case you're curious, we've taken a little bit of an intermission to look at COVID business adaptation stories. We really wanted to highlight some of our Vaughan businesses that are doing really interesting, bold, innovative things in response to the COVID restrictions. And so we've got 5 episodes out as of today, and I hope you'll also tune in for those. Mr. Mayor, do we have you back?
So what I'm going to suggest is that we pivot to our panel discussion.
Can you hear me?
Oh, here we go.
Oh, you can hear me. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I'll start where I left, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Coming through? Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, you just went on mute.
Okay. So basically, the reason why I think today's gather is extremely important is to get a sense of how our city also has been able to overcome the COVID crisis. And it's interesting to note that during this period of time, we've actually seen an increase.
Mr. Mayor, we seem to have lost you again.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, there we go.
Okay. So sorry about this. I don't know what is going on here, but I do want to say that it's important gathering because I think that during COVID-19, while we've been challenged, we've also noticed that an anomaly in the area of economic growth. What we've seen is actually an increase in permits being issued at a value at over $128 million in the first quarter. So while while there's a lot of news about COVID-19 and obviously the impact and the contraction that it's occurred in many cities and indeed the world as it relates to economic growth, what we have witnessed here in the city of Vaughan in certain areas, particularly in the area that we're talking about today, the Vaughan Metropolitan Centre, has been an increase. And essentially what is happening is that the area is growing faster than expected. And that is good news, obviously, for the city in a number of fronts. You must all remember that this Vaughan Metropolitan Centre has been a big part of my agenda for the city. And to give context, I think it's important to recognize the fact that the VMC today is in high demand by office tenants. The first two office buildings comprising of over 390,000 square feet of office space are 100% leased by nationally recognized tenants, including KPMG, PwC, Canada, GFL Environmental, Harley Davidson Canada, just to give you a sense. And from 2015 to 2020, the VMC attracted more than $9 billion in economic activity, with much of this rooted in unprecedented construction projects that are building our growing skyline with new business and residential developments. Vaughan Council has approved the development of more than 10,000, almost 11,000 new residential units. In November, we celebrated the opening of the PwC YMCA Tower, a 240,000 square foot smart center mixed use project, which will include office space for this global professional services firm, in addition to the YMCA and the new Vaughan Public Libraries branch. In January 2019, we marked the historic arrival of Niagara University to the VMC, the first university in our city and in our region. And we've seen immense growth. The VMC, as we all know, is also home to the Vaughan Metropolitan Centre subway, the Smart Center Place bus terminal, and the Viva Next Rapidway transit system that I'm sure Mary Frances Turner will be speaking about. And in proper planning, this steps away from Niagara University Vaughan campus. And it's this creating a connection to surrounding communities and making it easier for people to go where they need to go that will contribute to our continued success. Our other city building milestones include the significant progress made on the construction of the iconic YMCA Center for Community and new high-rise residential developments such as Transit City Tower 1 and 2, the Met, the Expo Cities 3 and 4, and Scotiabank expanding into the PwC YMCA Tower. This is a new mixed-use development applications located at 3,300 and 2,851 Highway 7. What you've seen here is all this activity is really the results of also some advantages that we have as a city. And I think this is very important to understand. And that's why it's very important to build a strong foundation in a city. Having said that, I want to say that there is something that we refer to as the Vaughan Advantage, which has played an important role in economic growth. The Vaughan Advantage speaks to the fact that we are we're very close to the international airport. And when you consider that we have 19,000 businesses in the city of Vaughan that create over 225,000 jobs, this gives us an advantage. We are also an area that is a city, I should say, that is very well educated and talented. As I said earlier, with 227,000 people working in this city, we're punching way above our weight. Very few cities in North America grow at our rate. Our city is growing faster than our own economic growth projections. And Vaughan is far outpacing the provincial and federal numbers in this area. And despite the challenges presented by COVID-19, we continue, our future continues to shine bright. To put it in perspective, because this really matters, since 2010, we have created over 60,000 new jobs, and we've issued more than $12 billion in building permits and maintain an economic growth rate of over 4% year over year. This gives us a very, very strong foundation to build on. And with the great investments that we have made in transit, obviously anchored now to the subway, we offer seamless connectivity throughout the GTA. And as a result, this has made the Vaughan Metropolitan Centre a very attractive place to be. Given the time that we're going through and the time constraints, I'm going to stop there and maybe open it up to the panel, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Clearly, there's a strong symbiotic relationship between, what's happening in the broader city of Vaughan and what's happening in the VMC, which, obviously, cores and everything around them aren't separate beings, but the growth seems to be feeding each other in really positive ways. So the mayor is going to be sticking around for the panel, but we are going to add 2 more voices to the conversation. And before I introduce them, I'll make just a quick note that if you have questions during the panel discussion, you can put them into the Q&A box, and we will have some time at the end to get to some of them. So our first panelist is Christina Bruce. She is the City of Vaughan's Director of the Vaughan Metropolitan Centre program, leading the city's dedicated multidisciplinary team responsible for leading the shaping the form, identity, and experience of Vaughan's emerging downtown. We also have Mary Frances Turner, who's the president of York Region Rapid Transit Corporation, where she has been central to the development of the VMC Mobility Hub and rapid transit across York Region. Thank you both for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so we've got you both and your audio working, and the mayor as well. So I'd like to start with a bit of an icebreaker, free for all for any of the panelists to jump in. How is the VMC of today different than what you expected 5 to 10 years ago? Things have really evolved since then. So I'm kind of curious about how things have changed and what surprised you.
Sure, I can jump in first. There's been a lot of change. Until recent development activity began to rapidly transform in the last 5 years, the site was a combination of developed commercial property, light industrial development property, and undeveloped land. The changes today, the pace of development and the scale of development that we're seeing in the VMC. The first building, the KPMG building, was occupied in 2016. 4 years later, we have 6 residential buildings occupied, 2 office buildings fully occupied, 6 residential towers under construction, 2 mid-rise buildings under construction, and 22 urban townhouse blocks under construction, as well as the 3 transit buildings. The heights are ranging now from 55 to 65 stories. When we planned, our maximum height was 35 stories in the original VMC secondary plan.
Mr. Mayor?
I think what's important above and beyond the physical structures and the great numbers that we are citing today, and the economic numbers that we're citing, and the number of square feet, what I see that is very different than perhaps what people may have envisioned 10, 15 years ago is the incredible capacity for this space to open itself up to human experiences. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I promote is sensory-based planning, where, and by that I mean that you have to create a sense of place. And what is emerging in very short time is that people identify with the Vaughan Metropolitan Centre in ways that perhaps we underestimated early on. And that is the reason why when Mary Frances Turner says to us that we should take a walk around that place now, she is actually responding to the fact that it's developing a soul, it's developing a sense of belonging. And when I speak to the people now that live in that area, there is a sense of a community evolving in a way that perhaps we underestimated. So people are finding a sense of place. And I'll tell you why that's important. Because while numbers drive the economy, while the number of floors in a building and all the economic numbers seems to get sort of the attention, what sometimes in city building gets very little attention is the type of community that you're actually building. And so what I think that is extremely important about today's Vaughan Metropolitan Centre is this expression and manifestation of the human interactions that are taking place and the sense of belonging. And that to me is what defines an enlightened city. It's not just, the bricks and the glass and everything else that goes into building a building, but it's how is it adding to the human experience? And I think that has been really the success story the untold success story of the emerging VMC, and something that requires much more attention from people, because when you create a comfortable environment for people to live in, where they're having great human experiences, you know, where you have like the YMCA, and you have a bus terminal and the subway that is avant-garde and world-class, these type of experiences add to the residents' experiences, which to me is ultimately what city building is all about. I understand square footage is very important in the real estate market. I understand the number of units are very important. But what's also very important is to create a human experience that is memorable and that enriches people's souls.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could, you're on my favorite subject, which is, you know, the art and the spirit of placemaking. And if there was one adjective that I would use to describe what's different today than where we were 5 to 10 years ago, 10 years ago, is really the brilliance of what's unfolding at Vaughan Metropolitan Centre. And that's the very art of placemaking, creating a community truly where people do want to live, work, and play, and to have rich experiences where they live, and that architecture and placemaking is at the heart of that. And so, yes, absolutely. At the end, the mayor and I do want to invite you all to take that walk with us, truly, physically, when we can do that, and see the brilliance of the spaces that are unfolding in Vaughan Metropolitan Centre, where placemaking and architecture mean things like transit don't take a back seat. They actually are the central space, the heart of the downtown core, where interaction and people gathering and living and working all happen. It's truly brilliant. And the only thing I would add to that, if I could, Michelle, is that it's not, it didn't just happen. It is the result of a visionary leadership, political leadership, and a huge array of professionals, some of who are listening to this seminar, and I know you're out there today, who knew what it took to put together all the pieces, to put all these foundational pieces together, and to watch this begin to unfold as richly as it is. It's a pretty exciting story.
Thanks to all three of you. You know, I think it's great to be hearing about such a strong focus to the people and to the quality of life and to that, you know, the sensory experience of it all. Now, I want to get into a bit of a tougher question. How do we maintain all of that? And how do we make sure that all of this stays part of the vision when the VMC is growing so fast and so much faster than we had originally expected? So this question is for Christina. At a staff level, what is the, well, I guess more than a staff level, but, you know, as a city, what are we doing to make sure that we keep those two things matched as we keep growing?
Sure. Thank you, Michelle. And yes, absolutely. We are growing faster than expected, but certainly not too fast. It's a good scenario to have given the significant investments that were made in the transit infrastructure. As Mary Frances mentioned, the development of the VMC was guided by a vision, a robust planning, infrastructure, and policy frameworks. So over the past several years, a number of these plans and studies have been completed that provide a vision for transformation of the downtown into the vibrant, transit-oriented, and sustainable center that we want. Vaughan skyline, though, has been dramatically transforming over the last few years as buildings continue to reach greater heights. It's setting new benchmarks across the region. So with this increased building height comes increased density, both of which are significantly above what we originally contemplated in the VMC secondary plan. But at the staff level, we recognize this pace of growth, and the momentum exceeds our expectations. So well in advance of 2031, our original timeline for the secondary plan, we've initiated a number of updates to the foundational studies that were originally created. So understanding that these trends will continue, the city has initiated an update to the secondary plan as well as a number of the supporting studies. Underway currently is the servicing strategy, VMC transportation master plan, as well as the parks and wayfinding master plan that you mentioned earlier, Michelle. This is a study that presents an opportunity to think boldly about the city, about the VMC, the way that people move through it, and the role of parks and open space in the modern urban life. Now we're trying to focus on ensuring the infrastructure, the hard and the soft, is in place and phased in to support this growth. We're trying to be innovative in delivering amenities through unique collaborations, for example, the Center of Community, as well as integrating the commitments to placemaking through public art obligations, architectural excellence, the POPs delivery, as well as programming and activation events in this VMC.
Michelle, if I may join in here for a second, I think that Christina gave an excellent rundown of all the measures that we're taking. I do want to speak though a little bit about how important it is for all of us to maintain discipline and focus, and to always be guided by the ultimate goal of creating a community where people can find literally joy, happiness, and fulfillment. And that is done through a disciplined approach and through tenacity and perseverance and I relate to principles. City building is a labor of love. It is, and by that, I mean the verb, not the noun, to love. And to love people means to understand that you're creating a space where people are actually going to live their lives. That is an incredible and important responsibility bestowed upon city builders. It's not just issuing permits. It's not just making sure that the development charges are paid and all that. It goes well beyond that. It's an act of creation, and creation needs to be taken seriously. It needs to be respectful of the environment. It needs to be respectful of people's interaction. It needs to create an environment where positive energy is generated. And I do think that with the focused approach that Christina and her team and many others that have participated in the Vaughan Metropolitan Centre project, I think it could be achieved. It is when you lose that focus that city lose their way. And so above and beyond the bylaws that you need to follow and the procedures you need to follow, city building is an existential manifestation of the soul of the city. And it's very profound because we, especially in the city of Vaughan, we were given a parcel of land, literally green land, right? That basically was our own canvas, right? And so now we have to paint it, and we have to make sure that it's got the right colors, that it's got the right texture, that it emanates emotions and feelings that are positive. And without getting too philosophical or spiritual about it, I do think that city building is precisely about that. There is a reason why when you walk through some cities in the world, you get a certain feeling or vibe. And why some cities move you and other cities, you just can't wait to get out of them. And I think what we're doing by investing, for example, we haven't talked about this, but we're investing hundreds of millions of dollars on environmental improvements in the area. People sometimes forget about that. Why? Because we look at the elements of water, green spaces, as elements that are important to the human spirit, especially in societies like ours, where people need to refuel their energy base. And so all this is very well thought out. It doesn't happen by chance. We're not investing in rehabilitating creeks just because we have nothing to do with our money, because we have a lot to do with funding. But we invested in areas that we know areas that are going to be good for the human beings to live in that space, and that is fundamental. And so remember, this is an act of creation, and city building is a labor of love. That's very fundamental to building successful cities today.
I couldn't agree with you more. Just to build on this notion of really loving your city and thinking about whenever I've traveled, and I know we're not traveling right now, but when I do travel, I know I just come back filled with, I'll pick up the phone and I'll talk to, the Mitch Goldhars, who also has traveled and really contribute to this vision, and say, Mitch, you gotta go see this place. You gotta think about that place. We all just need to just close our eyes and think about being in a space that we want to go back to time and time again, because it is actually a place that goes into your soul and says, this is good, right? This is brilliant, to use those words again. And it is just this huge responsibility, but an exciting one, and an exciting one that's been fueled by all of the energy and the attention that's been brought to this place, that started out as a greenfield, and a home to our First Nations. So it's exciting.
Mary Frances, I'd like to add something, and this is very consistent with city building, even beyond the Vaughan Metropolitan Centre. This is the reason why the city of Vaughan, we opened a 900-acre park, which is bigger than Central Park, because we believe in green space. And I'll tell you something else that is very important as we built the VMC in the city, is that political leaders need to understand that we're not building a city just for today and for 10 years down the road. I want from 200, 300 years from now to have people who live in the city of Vaughan to say that in 2018, 2019, there were a group of administrators and political leaders who had the vision to give us this 900-acre park. So you have to have a long-term view, and it shouldn't be based on the electoral cycle, by the way. It shouldn't be a convenient political move. It's got to be about making sure that you're building the very best. And this is the same energy that has driven us to build the very first smart technology hospital in the history of the country. It's the same ingredient. And that ingredient is a commitment towards excellence and making sure that our labor of love creates something that is truly outstanding for the individuals who can in fact share in that experience. So I hope that everyone listening is beginning to see the trend here, is beginning to weave the story together, that the city of Vaughan can claim now to be really even outgrowing itself in the sense of projections, because we are driven by what we feel is right and just for people. Our major motivation is to make sure that we provide excellence in everything that we do. And that is the reason why people are beginning to capture the essence of our city more and more. Because now all of a sudden, when they talk about healthcare, people are coming to the city of Vaughan to figure out, how do you build an avant-garde modern hospital, first smart technology hospital in the country, and one of the best in North America. How is it that during economic cutbacks, we were still able to bring a university to our campus? It's because we really care about giving the very best to the citizens that we serve, and underline the word serve.
So I do want to maybe for the technical people or the technically minded in the audience, I feel like they might be asking, okay, how do you take this really grand vision, and how do you turn it into reality? How do you get all of these things? So, question for any of the panelists, how do you bridge that gap? And what kind, obviously there's a million things, but, if we can summarize it, how do we bridge it?
I'll take a first shot, and because a long time ago, a colleague and I coined ourselves as complexity junkies. And in that sense, this is a very complex puzzle. And anyone who worked on bringing the subway into the heart of the downtown and linking it to existing infrastructure and all the new buildings that were underway under existing buildings will know how complex these types of undertakings are. So they're not an undertaking that you take on lightly. But the mayor has spoken very eloquently about needing to understand the building blocks that allow you to take apart the foundational pieces of great placemaking, the great art of city building, and getting those pieces right to begin with, whether those are getting your land and your water right, getting your infrastructure pieces in place, landing your first employment center, and creating the building blocks that allow all of the other things to unfold around it, but getting those pieces right. That's critical, is to drive to those pieces, lock them in, deliver them well, and then the rest can build up around it. So I would just start by laying that out for the mayor and Christina to speak to some of those foundational pieces.
Thanks, Mary. Christina?
Sure, yes. And I think building on that, you have to start somewhere. And right now we're seeing a critical mass in the VMC starting to form. The residential uses are there, where we have a huge population of people moving in. We are really starting in an area where they didn't have people living. Now we're getting that mass of people. They come first, and then the retail and the community services follow. And we're getting there. It just it's in its infancy as long as it's been planned. And we're really at the starting point now, is we bring people in and the building blocks necessary to make the urban center that we want.
Well, it is said that a person's character is shaped in the first 7 years of existence, right? That's why it's very important to pick up on a word that Christina Bruce said, infancy. And I think that we here at the City of Vaughan recognize that, relatively speaking, we are a young city. But let me put it this way. We're a city that our parents, I guess, taught us good manners, because we're doing it right. We're doing it in a way that because we're putting the person, the self, the real self, at the center of it, we concentrate all our energies on the individual and making sure that they are nurtured. And so in the same way that we need to nurture individuals, we also have to use infrastructure to make sure that it enhances that personal experience and reality. And that's why I'm a big promoter of principles-driven visions for cities. Because you have to start with some fundamental questions about where is it that you want to end up? What is your major focus? What kind of environment do you want to create? These are fundamental questions that I think, and this may sound basic, but it actually isn't, because sometimes in the world today, we don't ask the questions, therefore we don't get the answers. We ask the questions first and foremost because they inform our answer. And one thing I will tell you is that every question that we can ask ourselves in city building, there's an answer for. But you need to pressure yourself. You need to apply a bit of pressure. I don't mean this in anxiety terms. I mean pressure in the sense of really focusing on getting those answers. The reason why we will be successful and are successful, will continue to be successful, is because we're largely driven by our desire to get the right answers to the questions. And that's why, you'll get a kilometer park in the middle of, Transit City, right? I mean, we could have filled that space with other buildings, right? Probably for the developer, would be more profitable, and for the city, we would collect more taxes. But is that the city you want to build? The answer obviously is no. Right? You could have a place with no art near the subway, or you could have a beautiful piece of art emerging that lights up the downtown core, and that's where we went with the Smart Center and Smart REIT. Why? Because we are 100% dedicated to providing the best sensory experience for people, because we understand that at the end of the day, people operate through vibrational sources and effects. And so we need to respond to that reality. Now, we could do it the easy way, right? We could say, okay, look, let's build a whole bunch of buildings, people live in it, and that's the end of that. But if you want to build something special, it requires special effort. And when you look at and Mary Frances Turner can tell you that, you know, when we went to do sort of a quasi semi-private opening of the subway, what I was struck by was a walking through it, you saw the beauty of it and you saw the architectural brilliance of it, but we also remember seeing somebody playing a guitar. And you probably remember that, right?
I do.
And so you began to get the vibe of a city. And what was beautiful about that? Well, you begin to see the human interaction taking place, right?
Yeah.
And I still remember the song, was Stand By Me, which was kind of important to remember, because I think that those kind of interactions in the history of the city become part of the folklore of the city. But at the end of the day, why am I saying this? I'm saying that people in city building, you have to recognize that the bottom line is people. And who are we here to serve? People. Who are we going to give the best possible human experience to? It's people. And it's that people approach, and in a very kind and generous way, that generates the type of excitement that the city of Vaughan is generating. I think, you know, it's very much akin to seeing a beautiful concert. You hear the music, but you never see the thousands upon thousands of hours that the musicians have trained, right? And it's the same thing with our city. Yeah. Behind all those buildings, behind our transit system, and Mary Frances and Christina Bruce could speak to this very eloquently on it, because they've been major actors in that. And Michelle, you in the sense of promoting it. There's a lot of thousands of hours going on in the creation of something so special. And it just proves to me that city building is first and foremost a principle-driven exercise, and it has existential dimensions that create the very essence of its spirit.
That's a great final word. So we do have about 11 minutes for some Q&A. So Lita, do you have something queued up for us?
Yeah, definitely, Michelle. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Michelle, the mayor, Mary Frances, and Christina. It sounds like a lot of great things are happening in Vaughan. And it's time for Q&A from audience. So even Michelle, if you have anything to add, you can also answer as well. So first question is, will placemaking include some programming, and by whom? Bracket municipality, arts groups, others?
Sure, I can take the first stab at that response. Yes, we actually have a lot of placemaking already underway and activations in the VMC by the city run events like the concerts in the park last year, a little bit different now in COVID days, what we're able to do physically. But we also work closely with our partners. Last year, a large event was the hockey hometown hockey event. We've had the Vaughan Film Festival we've worked closely with, and have many partnerships across, and use the opportunities to activate the space that exists today and that we have planned in the future.
Okay, great. Anyone else would like to add to what Christina has answered?
Mayor, if I could just, you know, what I love about the space that's been created is its flexibility. So to be a transit terminal, to be part of a performing arts light show, to be part of your dinner hour, sitting and looking and experiencing these spaces, Transit Square itself, such a significant gathering spaces. These are places that you want to go and be in and experience those soulful experiences that you're talking about, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, and there's also, you know, ultimately, this space has to provide and will provide, obviously, the services required. You probably know about the YMCA. You probably know about the fact that there's going to be a library, that there's going to be public art. But in a city, it's also important to have places where they don't, I mean, you also need places where there's silence, right?
Yeah.
And where people can sit down in moments of reflection and contemplation, and perhaps leave the busyness and the loud sounds of everyday life behind, where they can center themselves. And that is the reason why we're investing, I think it's around $94 million in green space for some rehabilitation projects near the VMC, that are part of the VMC, to do that. Because I think we have to be very observant. We have to always think about the city and city building in a context of what is transpiring in today's society. Coming out of COVID-19, for example, many of you will agree that above and beyond the economy and the unfortunate loss of lives, people have undergone a stressful time in their life. And some of these stresses and stressors will not manifest themselves until after COVID-19. And so why are those spaces that I'm talking about important? Is because you have to provide residents and visitors to our city a place where they sense a sense of self and of being, right? So even on COVID-19, all the infrastructures that is being built with the view that we will have in the history of our city today, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, moments where human beings will feel like they're under pressure or under attack, in this case from a virus. So you got to always think ahead. And it's very interesting to see that through COVID-19, our city has done precisely that, right? There is now going to be a COVID-19 overlay in the way we plan the city. Why? Because unfortunately, I believe that in the history of our city, in the future, there will be another COVID-19 event, an externality that we're not counting on, just in the same way that we didn't count on COVID-19. But you got to be ready. And so you've got to think beyond the obvious and embrace the reality of externalities as a norm, which means that public spaces have to be places also where people sort of nourish their soul, where they have an ability to be with themselves and process information to live better lives. And so every event in city building, COVID-19 and others, are there for a lesson. And city builders that only are concerned about getting through the crisis, but not learning much from it, are the ones that will not be building the type of cities that I think Vaughan will in fact build.
All right, I think we have time for at least one more question.
Yes, just one more question. So the next question is somewhat related to the first question. What elements of a city center does VMC have or might it have in future to transform from a former suburbs? Maybe you can even elaborate with relation to COVID.
Might be perhaps one for Christina.
Sure, I can start with that. And I think what we said earlier, we have a foundational studies that will reach the vision we want for the VMC. With that comes a complete community, the parkland, the walkability, the people on the ground, as well as a quiet space the mayor was speaking about. With respect specifically to COVID, we are actually rethinking the impact that may have on what we were looking at for the original design. It speaks to the importance of more open space, more ability to be able to get around the VMC and the space between people. It may even impact the developments that are coming in, the tall office buildings perhaps, or the live work opportunities that people may be looking at in the VMC. And we're revisiting that now through some of these foundational studies, and perhaps there will be changes in the next few years related to the design and what our vision may be now related to COVID.
And Christina, could you comment a little bit on how, we've had sort of ways of doing things that are very suburban in nature and how the VMC is getting away from those?
Yes, we are. We're not a suburb. We are a downtown that will have everything. We'll have the placemaking where people can live, they can work, and they can play. Families, seniors, young adults. We want everyone to be able to be there and to live happily there and have the amenities they want. It may not be large grocery stores. It will not be large schools, perhaps. It's more of an urban setting, unique to the downtown.
And this would be a good plug, I think, for the podcast episode 9 about the YMCA. We talk a lot about how, you know, instead of doing a sort of traditional community center kind of model with parking lots around it, you know, this really took a very urban form that was quite different for Vaughan. Mary Frances, did you have anything to add or contribute into this?
No, I think, you know, Christina said it well. You know, it's a real journey to transforming yourself from this notion of being a suburb, a commitment to city building vision and visioning for the downtown. And I think the journey's well on its way. Proof's in the pudding. You know, invite you to come on a walk with the mayor and I and Christina and experience, you know, that this indeed is a city.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mary Frances. So we do have just 2 minutes left. So on behalf of ULI Toronto, our membership committee, I want to thank you everyone, Mayor Bevilacqua, Michelle Simpson, Christina Bruce, and Mary Frances Turner. Thank you very much for speaking with us today on the growth of Vaughan. And I was supposed to promote Michelle's podcast, but since we had that time earlier, I'm still going to mention it one more time. Michelle has Vaughan Rising podcast that everyone should listen to. And finally, thank you so much for all the members and guests tuning in for today's session. We hope you're all keeping very well, and we look forward to having you on our future webinars. And specifically, we actually have 2 more just around the corner, one more this Friday, as well as another one next Tuesday, and next one being Annual Trends in Real Estate 2020. So if you'd like to tune in for these 2, please join us. And thank you very much for everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nita.
Here.
Thank you to ULI for having us.